Now, Podcast One brings you Spike's Car Radio, a downloadable cars and coffee, hosted by writer, comedian, and automotive enthusiast, Spike Ferriston. Now, here's Spike.
How are you, everybody? Spike's Car Radio, here we are. We got Pete Stout from 000 Magazine. Talking Porsche. First, though, you guys wanted to hear my thoughts on the Lotus Evora GT, which I've been driving for the last 3 or 4 days. They didn't give me the blue one, which I wanted, Zuckerman. Remember you and I spoke about it, and they sent the green one.
I thought the green one looked really good, though.
Johnny Lieberman's fault. Apparently, he had it at the track with somebody else, and that car did fine, but the car they were racing on head-to-head broke down, and they needed it back. So I was stuck with it. Here's the, I have a lot to say about the car, and I'm not going to say it right now because I could fill the whole hour with it. First of all, headlines. Love this car. Drove it yesterday with Stacy Shulman and his manual gearbox GT3. And, boy, comparable, fun. Price is tested, $135,000. 0 to 60, 3.8 seconds, 416 horsepower. The Lotus got far more attention than the GT3, and I saw no other Lotuses on the street.
Do you think it was the look or the color?
The look, the color, the sound. It's got a big Lamborghini sound. It drives better than any other Lotus that I've ever driven so far.
Also agreed. Yeah, I drove one up in the Bay Area years ago with the Sharkworks guys.
Right.
And I was blown away both by how good the car was, and that was the earlier one.
Right.
The new ones are much better.
Yeah.
But then additionally, I couldn't believe the amount of attention that car pulled down.
Right.
Everywhere you rolled, people, kids, everyone was, what is that?
It's the, even last night, as I was pulling in after a baseball practice, some old guy, hey, nice car, like 8 nice cars per drive. 6-speed gearbox manual. I can't think of a better kind of weekend car for a guy who wants the GT3 but can't afford the GT3, right?
What's the MSRP, roughly?
This is 95, somewhere in the 90s. This one, as tested, was 135 because listen to the options on this thing. It's insane.
It's a lot of money, though.
Carbon pack, $10,000. Diamond cut stained black forged wheels, which you need, $3,000. Premium paint. I would do that, too. That's exclusive paint. Now they've got a couple things doubled up. Titanium exhaust, $8,000.
That was great, though. It looked like a Sebring exhaust almost.
Oh, I haven't seen that set.
Yeah.
If it actually sounded better, I would say get that. If not, and the color palette is amazing. A great color palette.
And you can get them to do things that are difficult to get to do with other manufacturers.
Really?
Like you can get all kinds of paint options, kinds of you can get special interior done. Oh. It's Lotus. So you can do tricks. If you want a green leather interior, guess what? You can get an Aston Martin green leather interior.
And I had the 2+2, so I had at least 2 little back seats for either amputees or my little kids.
Did you put your little kids in?
Yeah, of course.
Nice.
Yeah, they wanted to travel around with it. We couldn't get more than one baseball bag in the front boot, or the back boot, actually.
You got to sacrifice somewhere, Spike.
Yeah, that was it. Here's what I want to say to Lotus and Rob. And I love these guys, and I want to encourage them, and I don't want to be negative about it, but they have to finish the car. Here's the problem. All right? And I just want to keep it real with the listeners. For a $135,000 car, there are 3 tiny instrument electronic panels that look like Radio Shack circa 1981. That's my first issue. Secondly, when I get into this car for $135,000, I want an electronic key. I don't want the weird Skeletor key with the immobilizer that I then turn and then press the start button.
Are you saying it's got drive block? Is it like a 993?
It's
almost, yeah.
It's that part of it still feels, and the worst of it is the Alpine stereo that looks like an Allen Ed's add-in.
Yep.
With a reverse camera that's unusable. It is a staticky shot from outer space, from, again, the Apollo mission black
Well,
the
good news, Spike, is you don't have to worry about anybody ever breaking in to steal that radio. Back in the day, it would have been the first thing stolen. Now no one will take it.
But you hear what I'm saying. I'm not going to... This car gets the most important things right. If you want something that's a little cheaper than a GT3 to drive on the weekends, this is your car. It is really fun. Handles really well. They get all the important stuff right. You got to finish it, guys. Just finish it with some basic electronics or take that crap out of there. If it's too expensive, take it out and get rid of the weird key. They have one of the most responsive start buttons, the on-off start. The second you even get it within an inch of it, it goes, wow, and it fires up.
Well, and it sounds special. It sounds special all over the place. A friend sold his GT4 to buy one.
Right,
to buy a Evora 400, I believe, and it's just this killer.
Yeah, it's great. I just don't want the click, click, turn, turn, bing, bing. Like cracking a safe every morning I get into the car.
But it's special. But the car's special out in the world.
It's very, very special.
It's a cool car.
Visibility, I'm not going to, there's no visibility in the damn thing. If they had the screen with a camera so I could see where I was backing up, that would be fine. But, I'll put up with that in a Lamborghini. I'm not going to put up with it in this. So either fix the screen or take the louvers off. You can't see the engine, though, when you're... Did you notice that when you drove it?
Yeah.
In the rear view, you see the engine, you see the little throttle linkage right there.
This is the specialness. I mean, this is all the little stuff that's kind of missing
cool.
in these days. In today's cars.
I like that. So again, I'm giving it...
The shifter's great. The brakes are great.
The best grade I can give this car. Driving, I'm going to give it an A. Just as an overall as a car, it's still a B+. I want them to finish it or take the other crap out and make it more analog,
okay,
right?
But B+ for Lotus is that's a big compliment. If you think about as a car, that's a big compliment from back in the day.
Yeah, and Rob, who does PR for them, Rob, I want the blue one. I want the blue one. Get me the blue one.
Get me one. I want one.
Get Zuckerman.
With radio delete, Rob. When you send it to Spike, make sure it doesn't have a radio at all. Just take the radio out.
Pete, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well.
We're going to talk.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
000 Magazine. We're going to talk Porsche today. This is going to be a Porsche-centric show. I've got a ton to talk about here. First, why you were in town a couple weeks ago?
Yes,
throwing you had 2 or 3 events. What's going on? What are we doing?
I think it was 4 or 5 events.
4
actually.
or 5. What are we doing?
So we were there. We were here for Rare Shades 4, which is the 4th event of this celebration of unusual colors, Porsches in unusual colors.
Is this your event?
Yeah, we do this with PTSRS, which you may know Will Lee.
Yeah. So he's on Instagram, yes. PTSRS. If you don't know him, look him up.
It's presented by PTSRS and 000. We decided to partner with him.
STDs are us.
And exactly. And it really was Alex Pilevsky's idea. It was co-founder of 000. He called up or texted me and said, I have a genius idea in all caps. I thought, oh boy,
genius.
So I call him up. He says, we should do a Cars and Coffee for paint to sample. And I thought, that is a good idea, but let's make it a little more democratic. Let's make it a little more inclusive, and let's make it any unusual Porsche color from history. Mm-hmm. Which is great because in today's world, as you guys know, you go down the 405 or any freeway, and it's gray, black, white, silver. And I like those colors.
And then a couple of reds.
Everything is that.
Yes, it is.
And so the idea of this was, if you've got a 924 or a Carrera GT, whatever it is, or a Macan, someone showed up in Florida at Rare Shades 3. Someone showed up in Florida with a purple paint-to-sample Macan.
Wow.
It was like, what was the purple in the 993 days? The
Amethyst?
No, the non-metallic
Jubileum?
purple. What was the non-metallic purple in the 993 days? Anyway, she painted her Macan that color or similar, and she was fresh. She was really great to hang out with. So that's what
fresh.
Rare Shades is.
Rare Shades and fresh.
Yes,
it sounds
back
like
to
a
the
hip-hop
80s,
movie.
baby. Back to the 80s. So that's Rare Shades, and we did that in the Arts District in support of an exhibit that's still open and free at the A+D Museum, Los Angeles. The Architecture and Design Museum has done an exhibit on 000 as a birth of a design magazine, as a birth of a print project in 2016.
Wow.
So they did a retrospective on the launch of 000, and we wanted to support the museum by bringing a crowd over there. So we had about 80 cars and colors, and then another 10, 15 cars that were historically important 914s. And we did that because...
Wow, what cars were those?
So we had the 71 Daytona winner, the first time the car had ever been west. It had never been out on the West Coast, so it's here now.
Wow.
And it still has the original Jacques Duvall stencil paint on the original stencil is still on the roll bar.
Wow. Lufthansa car?
No Lufthansa car. We had the Monte Carlo car. That was brought over.
I love those cars.
Ex-LaRousse. Oh, that car's killer. The first production 914.6, the first 914.6 GT, the first 916.
Wow.
Big guns.
And then a 101-year-old original owner 1970 914.4, and she was probably the first customer in L.A., and she still has the car.
Does she still drive it?
She can't drive them, but she came. She showed up. Wilma showed up.
Wilma. She was the last living Wilma.
Yeah, she was in the mix, and she's great.
Firecracker.
And the car's killer. The car's silver metallic with these gray sort of torque thrusty wheels that the dealer installed when it was new. And the deal was she and her husband went to the dealer in '69, cut right out in Santa Monica. They roll in and say, we'd like to put a deposit down for the mid-engine Porsche. And the sales guy's like, well, we don't we don't do mid-engine cars. We just do rear-engine cars. And they put the article down in front of the guy. It's like, well, one's coming. And they said, we don't know anything about this. That's just a magazine, so, sorry. And she said, well, we'll put our money down. Are you really going to refuse our deposit? We'll just leave our money with you. So they took the deposit, and the first 3 cars showed up, and people wanted them, and they held them. No cell phones, none of that stuff back then. So they called her up, and she went down to the dealership with her husband, and she wanted the red one. They had 3, but it had port damage.
Yeah.
And so she...
Just like today.
So she chose the silver one, and she doesn't remember what the 3rd car was. And she's had it ever since. That's been her car.
What a great story.
Since new.
And now we're all going to be camping outside of her house. Right?
Yes,
Zuckerman
yes.
Another great
914
piece.
watch.
He already take I kept thinking of Cat Bob when he was talking about the Lotus. So I was back to Cat Bob. We can Cat Bob a Lotus.
Wait, I got some information on Cat Bob.
So we got to watch out with.
Look, he's already shaking.
So look,
we can't talk.
So it's a.
Somebody told me that car.
It's a.
Is
what was I going to say?
Hold on. I got a message.
Pete doesn't want to talk
I know
about
Pete
this.
doesn't want to talk about it, but I'm
Dial
going to
it
talk
back.
about it.
Cut.
Do you remember, Zuckerman, that text I sent you about that car? Where did it say it was?
It was the last. Was it the last?
I'm going back over our text thread here.
It was one of the last G-body cars, right?
Yeah.
And
no, not that. I got a message on Instagram that the car is at a dealer right now, that someone else owns that car.
The black car?
Yeah.
No, I doubt it.
Okay, you
could be wrong.
guys chat for a
I could be
second.
wrong.
I'm going to find this.
Well, let's go back to...
So the other 914s that were there that were important was, I think, one of the only survivors of the original SCCA 914s were the Richie Ginther, where they cut the windshield off.
Right.
And then the 1981 car, Wayne Baker, the 4-cylinder called the Bus.
We know Wayne Baker cars, yeah.
So Wayne Baker's Bus was there. And then finally, David Finch brought out the ex-Bob Kirby Mark Hotchkiss 2005 SCCA National Championship car, which was the last significant win for a 914 in 2005. So it was a kind of a killer collection of cars. And then we did a panel discussion that afternoon with Alan Johnson, who is amazing, and David Finch and Hotchkiss and Hans Lepine. So we kind of had this whole discussion about the 914 at 50 years.
Okay, here it is. Here's what it says. It just came in from an Instagram. Cat Bob News. Someone said, Cat Bob, I was tipped off as to the whereabouts of the infamous Special Wishes 930 Cabrio with leather everything. And they put this dealership right there. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, I know this person. Yeah, no.
Fake news?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It could be. I'd have to check in on that.
But he didn't really say if it was for sale or what. It was
I don't think that car will ever be for sale.
Well, it's going to be for sale someday.
That's right, someday.
Yeah, someday, like Wilma. Like Wilma's car.
You guys are killing me. I mean, for him, that thing is art. And so... And
it is art. That's why we like it.
We were in New York and wanted to go see it. And we texted you, but we never heard back. I
told you guys, if I'm in New York, you're in New York,
we all have to be there together.
We all have to be there together.
Okay.
Okay. This is like the Crispin Glover movie.
Yeah. It's one of those things. Exactly. So lastly...
What does that mean?
Oh, wait, remember... Okay.
Oh, no, forget that. That's such a tangent. We've got so much Porsche news to talk about.
So the last thing to mention of the weekend
because I've got to get to some other bigger Porsche news.
The reason we did 914 was... when the museum opened on the 7th, and I think the exhibit goes through the end of November. So if people are in Los Angeles, if you're in the Arts District, head on down to the A+D Museum. But we said, hey, could we do Rare Shades on the 7th when you open? And they said, well, we're museum people. We'll be asleep till noon that day.
Perfect.
So you could do it the next Saturday. So we looked at the calendar, and it was 9/14 on the 50th anniversary, and we're like, yeah, you got to do it. So we did the Sunday night, we did an event for S subscribers at a friend's place in the Palisades, and we did a discussion on the 914 as the mid-century Porsche. And that occurred to me because my wife and I, we bought a mid-century last year, and we've been sitting in it. I was sitting in one night, and I was like, this thing is a 914. It feels and lives bigger than its square footage. It's really well designed for living. And I've had a 914 since I was 15 years old, and I've always struggled with the design at different points. And I've grown to like it a great deal. But when I was 16, I thought, kind of hoopty, and I wasn't into it. But as time has gone on, I wouldn't say I think it's pretty, but I've come to view them as beautiful in their way.
Very valid cars.
Very valid
I love the way they look. I mean, and
it's
gorgeous.
Mid-century architecture is kind of that way. For years and years, no one wanted it. Realtors wouldn't show it. And now it's all the rage. It's come into its own.
Right.
And I feel the 914 has come into its own. So I called up Mark
Eloquent.
Hadaoui, who I think
Right.
you guys
Yes.
know Mark. So I called Mark Hadaoui, and I was ready for him to say, yeah, you're crazy. And he says, he listens to kind of the theory, and he says, no. He said, and this guy knows mid-century. And he says, no, that's right. He said, the 914 it fits. It works.
Right.
Because the car companies aren't always at the cutting edge with design. They often follow fashion. They follow things. And if you think about the 914, it was Porsche's. It was only their third production car design. There's been miss history basically with a lot of books where they said it was done out of house. That car, that design was under Butzi and his team, and it was designed by Heinrich Klee primarily, who we have to thank for the Fuchs alloy wheel. So same guy that did the Fuchs did the 914, and that car was, late 60s gestation, which is when Eichler was doing this with sales. Eichler was just going through the roof with sales, along with Alliance and Hester and all these others. So the 914 was also like mid-century because the idea was to bring good design to the masses. So there's just a lot of things that fit, but overall for me this car didn't look like cars before it because it was designed to be ultra useful. It was designed to be high utility, mid-engined, long wheelbase, no overhangs, very clever packaging. Put 3 people in comfortably, and I did that all the time in high school. So that was kind of the idea for Sunday night. So we had Frances Anderton of KCRW design show DNA. So we asked her to moderate a discussion between Freeman Thomas, Mark Hadaoui, and myself on the 914. It was a really intimate night.
Right. Very clever,
really cool.
very clever group of people to have discussed the design of a car. It's a different angle.
That was the goal.
Back in the day, the first time I ever drove a Porsche was with David Letterman stuff, and that's the car that really took me. He had a silver black 914
Really?
6. I said, what is this? Right.
Letterman had one.
Yeah, way
didn't
back
know that.
then, and then I bought one, and then Jerry had. We've always loved those cars because the way they handle on the road.
Yes.
At night you can just jam, and a 911 can't keep up with you. And I remember driving Jerry's 914 6 GT, and he was chasing me in the IROC up in the canyons in Malibu. He could not touch me in that car. I mean, they just go.
It goes back.
The original Boxster. Do you have phlegm, Zuckerman?
Yes.
You have some phlegm? Do you see my phlegm problem has gravitated to you? What is that?
I better wash my hands on my way out
Anyway,
here today.
look, we got to take a break. Hold on. We're gonna because I've got to talk about the Taycan. I've got to talk about the 992. We've got a ton of questions.
Are we going to get into Yellowbird?
I've got more surprise Porsche news that just came in this morning that I need your point of view on. We'll be right back with Spike's Car Radio. Okay, everybody's got a to-do list, dropping off, dry cleaning, picking up some milk. Here's an idea. Let's save hundreds of dollars on car insurance. And the good thing is, you don't have to drop off or pick up anything. All you have to do is go to geico.com, and in 15 minutes, you could be saving 15% or more on your car insurance. Extra money in your pocket, my friends. You know what to do with that. It's just may be the most rewarding to-do you do today.
You're listening to Spike's Car Radio.
And we're returned that quickly. All right. Now, are you embargoed on any of this stuff?
No, now I'm not. I've driven 992 and I've driven Taycan, and there's no more embargoes on any of it.
Okay, let's start with the 992. Give us, first of all, where did you drive it? What were the conditions?
All right, so first I rode it around Hockenheim, and then I drove it in Valencia and the mountain roads around there, and then on track also.
Porsche called you up and said, we want you to take this thing out.
Yeah, so international press launch. So
are you putting it in the magazine?
Yeah, I already covered it.
Okay,
it's already
great.
been in the book. I think it was issue 9 or 10, probably issue 9. Drove it with a really great driving partner, and that's a key thing on these press launches is, everyone thinks it's a picnic.
Right.
But you get in a car with someone who's a bad driver or scares you or you scare them, and the mood is off.
You want Walter Rohr.
Yeah, pretty much. Or Michael Harley. This guy's solid. So
right, okay.
I was fortunate to partner with him on the day, and I can always drive the way I like to drive, and he drives the way he likes to drive. We both get what we need out of the day. And, it's funny because at Hockenheim, there's an engineer at Porsche who I've gotten to know over a while, and I really like him. He's a cool dude. I met him on 991.2, and I always ask these engineers, I'll say, well, what was your first project at Porsche? And you'll get some pretty interesting answers, like, Neusser, it was the 968 3-liter 4, so I had all kinds of questions about the paint can pistons, and, so
right.
So this guy, I said, what was your first deal? And he says it was the 993 Carrera RS.
Wow.
And I said, you're the one. Because if you drive a 964 RS, the original, not with updated dampers or anything, they're not great on the street.
Right.
You know?
I'm driving one today.
Yeah, okay. They're not great on the street. Although it's interesting, there's a lot of 964S owners who will say, "Oh, this is fabulous," and I'm convinced now after talking with Hart McChristen at Porsche that have you driven an RS 3.8?
I have not.
Yeah,
the wide car. It's magical, and so I have this theory that they did something with the dampers in that car, the steering. They got some little details right. And so I mentioned to Chris, and he's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "When we came out with the RS 3.8, we sold a few cars, but we sold a lot of dampers." So I have this pet theory that a lot of the people who think their 964Ss are great, someone bought the set of dampers from PAG from Porsche back in the day and converted.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so this guy...
Anyway, 992.
993.
That's
No,
what we want
we're
to
getting
hear
there.
about.
We're getting there. So 993 RS. So I'm like, you're the one who fixed
comic
it.
book guy again.
So I didn't need that with you. You want to talk about...
of Superman? We then a tangent.
You want to talk
for a
about
minute.
tangents. So
I just want to know if the 992
I'll put Zuckerman under the bus on
is
tangents.
worth
Yes,
buying.
we're getting there. We're getting there.
That's what we want to know.
We're
We're
getting
going to
there.
run out of time.
So we're getting there. So basically, I said, "You're the one." So I got to know him back then, and I show up in Hockenheim, and here he is, and he's almost apologetic. He's like, "Pete, I'm really sorry, but it gained some weight." Like he was all bummed out. Like you could see he was like bummed out about it. And I was like, "Oh, you're my people." So we started talking, and I was kind of worried. And you know why it mainly gained weight was because of the 8-speed transmission. I don't know if you know this, but
I don't.
It has another main shaft to provide for the 8th gear, and so that.
The
main
that
shafts
none of
are
us
heavy.
want.
Gears are heavy. Main shafts are heavy.
Right.
But then next, they had to make that space for the hybrid gear, which is empty in the regular cars. And then where it spiders out from there, he was explaining, is because then you have to have a larger hole in the chassis. And when you have a larger hole in the chassis, you need more bracing. And so the weight just grows out from there.
Shafts and holes.
How much weight?
It's not huge. It's like it's. He's crying about it. Us purists are crying about it. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 some odd. I'd have to go back 50 kilograms. I'd have to go back
100 pounds.
So it's 100 pounds, 110
Yeah.
pounds. But I have to go. Don't quote me on that because I don't have my notes out.
It's fine.
But basically, so I was a little worried. So I always put Harley in first, and I'm riding along, and I switched in on a mountain road. And from the very first corner, you know this deal with testing cars. Some cars surprise you. Some cars it takes a while to figure them out. This car, the moment I turned it in, I was like, "Oh, this is this guy's car." Like the car still handles like someone who set up the 993 RS. It handles beautifully. And then at the racetrack at Hockenheim, I was noticing with 991.2, the factory drivers are having a tough time with some of the riders and some of the reporters going up a hill climb. They had a closed hill climb, and I tell this story and people are like, "No, it can't be." I've got video that shows it. This guy could not get away from a base Carrera in a GT3 RS out of second gear turns because of the torque. And I thought back then, yeah, but if we're on a racetrack, that RS would be in a different zip code. Fast forward one generation, we're at Valencia, and that engineer comes over to me at the end of the day. So he's like, "Your perception was right. The factory drivers were saying that with a few of the journalists, they were having a tough time keeping any real gap. And they were in a 991.2 RS on a racetrack, and the journalists were in 992 Carrera 4Ss. Wow. And when he told me that, I said, "This is just the beginning of the platform." And he says, and he said, "Genau, precisely. This is the beginning of the platform."
Wow.
And the RS, you have to. So I was sort
that's
of
a little of what Matt Ferris said,
Right.
when he was talking about the car.
Absolutely.
Right.
But now let's split the conversation, though. There's speed and there's experience. So I went and walked up to one of the factory drivers in the RS and said, "Can I go around the track with you?" Because I'd followed him just previously. And I was surprised how easy it was to keep up, especially out of turns with the torque. And so I got in the thing, and okay, there's a difference between speed and experience because the RS is, I mean, the noises are insane.
Right.
And the noises in the 992 are good, but they're not those kinds of noises. The other thing that I wasn't as crazy about with the 992 is I spent a day with it in San Francisco, and that shifter is for the birds.
The little Bic shiver, the shaver?
That thing's rough.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's fair to compare a GT3 RS to a
No, it isn't. For sure not.
But that it's competitive in some way is interesting.
And you raise a
right?
great point. Something that's driving me crazy in media is a lot of the media takes a measuring stick of GT3 and applies it to everything.
Yeah.
Guess what? That's a terrible measuring stick for a car you have to drive every day. I mean, I love GT3s. I love GT3s. But right now, I drive a standard Carrera stick.
Right.
And I drove it down here from San Francisco last night. I went 400 miles on one tank in 7th gear, and it felt supreme going over the grapevine. I arrived comfortable. I wasn't tired. And the car's lovely on a back road. It's not it's a great car on a back road too. So we apply this GT3 measurement to a car that really isn't designed to be for...
That's not what it is.
Yeah.
The 992, the two things that caught my attention were the rear end design. Well, I didn't like. It looked like a bad, Darth Vader helmet with the exhaust pipes a little too far in, and the shifter. First of all, why is the shifter the stubby shifter? Have they explained that?
So I talked to a guy named Matthias Kula about it, who's one of the designers. You may know Kula. He's a very cool guy.
I don't know him.
One of us. He's a real enthusiast collector. He's oddly into all kinds of Hemi stuff and Chrysler stuff. Neat guy. And I was talking to him about it, and he said, well, one of the things with that shifter is it is form follows function at some level, because if you have a big shifter, like a normal standard sized, like PDK, the ones we know, the engineers said, well, if you're going to have that, you then have to engineer it because people will put a certain amount of force into it. If it's this size of a lever, people will put this much force into it, and then you have to engineer that, and it's heavier.
I hear that argument, but I'm not
the
buying
car
it.
Is heavier?
The shifter
ultimately.
Well, I like shifting with that big shifter.
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
It's the proper tactile.
I agree 100%.
So what is I still don't understand. So
It's dainty, so you'll use less force in it, and you won't break it.
But I've been using plenty of force in the other one.
That's why it's a false argument.
But they're saying that they can save a few ounces. Now remember, this is the company who does those goofy pull handles on like a RS to save a few grams.
I mean, if you think about a McLaren or anything else, with a push button, you put it in the gear, and then you're using your paddles.
And there's a secondary problem I have with the Taycan does it better than the 992, so it's a progression. But the other problem with the 992 setup is you've got the nubbin, you've got that little lever, but then you also have buttons. So you have two things going on. It's a little bit like patting your head and rubbing your belly.
Belts and suspenders.
What buttons for what?
For park or reverse.
Like
you do, I don't remember which ones.
There's a reverse button in it?
I don't
the
remember how that...
The shifter's not popping?
So it's Ferrari-ish?
But you hit... Yes, it's that mix, and I don't like the mix.
I don't like that either. I always found it to be...
it's counterintuitive.
Right, and you're constantly having to shift from levers to buttons.
Correct.
It's like a little mental hiccup.
It's this.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the patting your head and rubbing your belly. So I would say...
You laugh, but it's true.
No, I know.
You have to remember, if I want to go forward, I press the paddle on the Ferrari and put it into first. If I want to go into reverse, I have to hit a button.
But, there's something else that was kind of funny.
Is
those kinds of decisions, you wonder, how did this get through? And to me, that's fascinating. But one of those is the 992, like the Taycan, has this digital dash. And we all love our analog gauges. We like watches. We like things that are cool. And so we like these analog gauges. But the 992 has the digital setup. And I had mixed feelings on it in Valencia. Well, a week later, I was at Sears Point, Sonoma Raceway, in a 991.2. And I was going around the track. And as you both know, you've got that one screen next to the tack that you can configure. But the problem is I noticed I wanted to use Sport Chrono, and I wanted to keep an eye on my tire pressures. And you can't do that on track. And so suddenly, I had to admit that the 992 setup on the gauges is better.
In a very small application.
In a very small application. Yeah, that's fair.
GT3, excuse me, now I've got the phlegm, Zucker. When you transferred it, it's not going away. GT3.2 wants to know, what's your guess on the engine for the 992 GT3? Will it have the turbo, hybrid drive? What do you know? Do you know anything?
Guess. If we're guessing here, it's a guess, and my guess is that it's going to be a normally aspirated engine again.
Right.
He makes it, but he has a very Cheshire cat grin when he's saying this, that it's a guess. When I'm looking at his body language and he's saying it's a guess, and now the way he's turning red, he knows. Everybody knows.
Do you know?
I don't know.
Oh,
I don't. If I know something, I'll tell you.
Classic signs of lying.
He looked to the right. He looked to the right.
Here's the straight scoop. If I know something and I can tell you, I'll tell you. But right now, I can tell you this: I don't know.
Zuckerman is a human lie detector. He's lying. He knows.
Okay, let's go back then. Remember last time we talked about Speedster and you had all sorts of questions, and I told you I didn't know and I didn't know.
Right. Okay, here we go. Let's quickly the Taycan now.
Yes,
we have so much.
I know some things about that. I know some things.
You drove it,
yes,
and you did launch control in it.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Give us your snap review of this car. None of us have been in it. None of us have driven it.
I had a 5-day kink in my neck.
Wow.
I spent the day with Michael Harley again. We rolled out of the hotel, and he got on it in Sport Plus immediately after leaving the hotel. Because guess what? You don't have to warm up the oil.
Yeah,
we all have to wait 5-10 minutes before the oil's warm. So we're leaving, and I must have been looking out at something in Denmark out the window, and he got on it.
Whack.
kink for 5 days.
Is it comparable to ludicrous mode in the Tesla?
I haven't driven the Tesla, so I can't tell you that, but I have never, not in the 918 Spider, been in a Porsche that accelerates like this.
Right, yeah.
And so the two others, so I got the 5-day kink. Both of us intuitively, no discussion had, started warning each other and ourselves whenever we would floor it in Sport Plus.
Wow.
It's uncomfortably fast. I would never get the Turbo S. I would get the Turbo. The other thing is it's going to make...
Why? Because it's a little less fast?
It's insanely fast. It's like 0.1 slower, and that's all you need. But the other side, the other thing that's amazing about the thing is the pure acceleration at high speed. If you've driven a normally aspirated car on the Autobahn, if you get slowed down, it takes a while to get back up there.
Build up bad steam.
Yeah, turbo cars are king. We in America don't have much perspective on it, but over there, it's not so much that you get to go 200, it's that you get to go 120, 140, 90, 150, 75, 160. And so you're constantly going back and forth, especially between, let's say, 120 and 160. And the Taycan does not pull like a normally aspirated car where it takes forever to get back up. That thing, we were up to 269 kmh. Like that. That thing pulls like a freight train from so that's 167 miles an hour.
And what does it sound like?
Not much.
Does it make that electronic car sound?
So they got the fake sound. And Harley was all bummed out. He was sort of saying, "Oh, can we get the fake sound all the time?"
How does the fake sound work?
It's
exactly.
very.
And where is it coming from? Is there a guy?
The speakers. It comes from the speakers.
It comes from the speakers.
But you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. It'd be awesome if it was a guy in the back that came through the armrest.
But if it comes from the speakers, doesn't it also need to make sound outside of the car,
There was
right?
kind of a missed opportunity. They could have done a cuckoo clock, like an Austrian cuckoo clock.
I'm so happy they're
There's an opportunity for us to download noises and sell them to people on
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Ferrari
I like
V12,
right.
There's some things
Tell me,
you can do.
what do you feel? How do you feel about the weight of the Taycan?
The weight it's the one bummer, and we did a 2-day drive, and the one bummer with our legs from Denmark to Germany to Hamburg was that there were no great curvy roads, which is the thing I was hoping for. But there were some corners, and I pushed in, and you could tell. I was lucky it was dry. Some of the testers who got good roads had rain, and I don't know if I would have wanted to been running 5,200 pounds in a car I didn't know with new kinds of dynamics because the weight is so low. On a rainy road with guardrails everywhere, no thanks.
Right.
We had some on-ramps, off-ramps, some decent spots here and there, a few curves, and the thing handles.
Really?
It really does. It weighs about what a loaded-out Panamera or a loaded-out Cayenne Turbo does, but it's so low. The nearly the entirety of that center of gravity is below below the lug nuts. It's insanely low.
And where does this go? So two big complaints about the car: the turbo usage, right? The word, and you as a writer, and you the type of writer you are. I would imagine this upsets you greatly.
Honesty and naming matters. Like when the 325 no longer meant 3 Series with a 2.5 liter inline 6, I was bothered. I remember I thought, because is this the beginning of the end? So and sure enough, in a way, it was. I think the E60 or maybe the E60 was the real beginning of the end. But
are you bothered by the turbo?
Yeah, I don't like it.
It's stupid.
So here's the deal. There's a solution. It's called model designation delete. I would order a turbo and just be done with it. Just get rid of the designation.
Yeah, that's a little bit of like buying a bottle of Whiteout for your new edition of magazine, 000 magazine. But I'll just white out the cover.
But if you go to a cocktail party and somebody says, "What do you drive?" You don't say, "I've got a 911 Turbo S." You just say, "I've got a 911." If somebody asks, right? So
but you're skirting the issue. You're being very diplomatic here.
Sure.
It was a mistake. Let's just say.
But let's get back to that sound for a moment, because Harley asks, "Is there some way to have the sound on all the time, no matter what mode?" And the way it works is if you go to Sport Plus, you get this sound, this fake sound
through the radio.
Yeah, and so if you go to normal, you don't get the sound.
Right.
And so Harley asked the engineers, "Hey, is there some way to turn the sound on all the time?" Sure enough, 2 menus later, you can do it. So we did it the next day, and he's like, "Nope, the Porsche engineers got it right. I really don't want to have the sound." And what's strange about the sound for me was the next morning I get in the VW Eurovan to go to the airport, which my very Anoraki colleague reminded me isn't called a Eurovan in Europe. It's called a transporter. But anyways, we get into this thing.
Anoraki.
we get into this thing.
The America van.
And the guy starts it to go to the airport. I'm like, it's super loud. And then since I've been home in the Bay Area, I can't believe how many intersections are just wastelands of noise pollution.
Right.
And I'm a car nut. I've loved cars since I was a little kid. And now I realize all these inline 4s and workaday V6s and muffled V8s. Who cares?
Right.
But then I drove my 911 and I thought, no way I'm giving this up. Like the Taycan's no replacement for a charismatic, normally aspirated or turbocharged car. But I'm very happy to see all these internal combustion engines.
With respect to sound, though, one of the reasons to have an electric car is to have quiet in the car and to listen to your music.
Yes.
The sound is supposed to be directed outside the car so you don't run people over, right?
Right.
So is there a little speaker there with a guy
They do have to make noise. There's no cuckoo clocks or guys on the fender or anything, but that's something else you raised that was interesting. While we were over there in Europe, I thought the timing of this could not have been better on a few fronts. First of all, the whole Elon Musk, the whole Tesla, the ring time thing has been a boon for Porsche.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Because as we drove through Denmark, which I didn't get the sense is really a car kind of country, the amount of attention this car pulled down shredded the 918, the Carrera GT, any of the GT3 RSs, all these cars I've driven in Europe over the last 20 years. None of them turned heads like the Taycan, which is a four-door sedan.
Yeah.
So and they weren't crazy colors. It was white. It was silver. It's all, by the way, it's all about the aluminum roof, not the glass roof, which we don't get initially. We can't get the aluminum roof, but the double bubble roof is the one to get. Skip the glass. But anyways, so we're driving through Denmark. First of all, I was blown away by how much the general public knew what this was, and I was quite heartened by the fact that the youth were all about it. Like everybody's saying kids don't care about cars. I'm not buying it. Driving through Denmark, these kids were going bananas for the Taycans, first of all. And then the other thing that was interesting is it was right in the midst of all those protests in Frankfurt about the automobile, all these protests going on. We're driving through Denmark in a smaller town. I got a sense it was like a county seat kind of place. And there was full-on protests going on. We had to be rerouted. And I thought the timing of this is unreal that they landed with this because up until Taycan, someone could have thrown rocks at Porsche saying, oh, you're this performance company. But now they're putting their eggs in this basket of zero emissions in towns. And then we arrived in Hamburg, and it was a full-on massive protest with police everywhere, military stuff going on. Like, it was a big deal. And here was a family with a picket. Like, they had their pickets, the dad and the son and the wife. And they smiled. Like, the dad pointed at the Taycan and smiled. And I thought, you got your picket out to talk about the climate, and we're getting grins. Now, what would have happened if we drove up in a GT3 RS?
Jalopnik reported yesterday Lamborghini's first EV will be a mature coupe designed likely based on the Porsche Taycan. Imagine that on that platform.
Here's one bummer with it that I wonder about. It's not so much a bummer as a question mark of what will happen. The one thing I worry about is, given the cost of developing something like the Taycan or these other electric cars, they're going to use those platforms as skateboards under all kinds of things.
Right.
And I worry about the day, will we end up in a day where we're not around the table here to talk about an Evora? Will we end up with a day where everything drives sort of the same?
Of course.
No. That won't happen.
Why not? Why not? Paul says yes, you say no. So.
There won't, because it creates an opportunity. It's going to be fun. I think we'll be in a day where there aren't many gas-powered vehicles and combustion vehicles out there. But then that won't be our generation. We'll be fine. We'll be on a porch dying like a bag of mashed potatoes with a rotten
the next
pumpkin
generation
head.
will probably thank us for not strangling them with our fumes.
But again, we start the podcast talking about the 914, and now look where we are. We're already around a table where everything is becoming more and more alike. These quirky cars. At the same time, you had the 914. You had Saab and Volvo making weird, peculiar cars, calling them, the Amazon? I mean, this kind of unusual or quirky or individualistic vehicle is already gone.
Well, don't forget the Evoque convertible or whatever that disaster is, which will be cute and amazing in 20 years.
Yeah, that really is. It's the Aztec of the age,
Oh,
right?
without question. But, it's interesting when you talk about that, Paul, because if you think about, everyone worships at the altar of the RS 2.7. Everyone loves that car, and it's a really important car in a lot of ways. But if you drive a stock RS 2.7, as we did that day, I think it was your car, the orange one, if you drive that and you drive a modern GT3, everyone says those old RSs are so hardcore, and they're not.
They're not. Very applicable in all circumstances.
Whereas GT3s are hardcore. GT3s are no joke. They're way sharper than those old RS 2.7s.
The 2.7 is usable everywhere.
Yes.
A little loud.
Yeah,
I drive a GT3 every day.
But it's effectively,
no problem
they almost called it the 911S 2.7, and they could have.
They could have.
They could have really called that car the 911S.
That ride with you was the start of a journey with that car.
Is that right?
Yes, because that car had been a little bit hot rodded, and we dialed it back.
Double hot rodded. And Jerry bought it hot rodded with titanium innards. I took them out and I put it up to 2.9 liters, and then he took it the next level.
Remember, I had that funky drop in the front and the wrong tires, and we took everything back to stock. Stock 2.7 you would lose your mind if you drove the car now. It's as intended.
We'll take a break right now. We'll come right back, answer your questions with Pete Stout. As always, everybody, thanks for listening to the show. We want to ask you a small favor. I'm reading on a piece of paper here. They want you to do a survey. It's just a little survey. Just keep in mind, I hate surveys. I can't stand them either. But if you want to make things better and help us out here at Spike's Car Radio, just go to podcast1.com/survey. And everything will be right there for you. That's podcast1.com survey. You know, give me 5 stars and 1 star to Zuckerman, and tell him you want to vote him off the island. The first 250 people who complete this survey will get a $10 gift certificate to Amazon.com. How about that? And 2 grand prize winners will be selected at random to get a $100 Amazon gift card. Free money. It's win-win, everybody. Our shows are supported by advertisers, so filling this out will really help cater to the needs of you as a listener. And keep in mind, I don't really care if you fill this out. They're making me read this. I hate surveys. I hate being the guy to ask you to do the survey. But if you want to do it, go to podcast1.com survey.
You're listening to Spike's Car Radio.
And here we are. Before we get to the questions of our listeners, Jerry sent me the Ocean City, New Jersey Boardwalk Reunion 356 page this morning. We are pleased to announce the tech session, presentation, and schedule. And on that schedule, from 12 p.m. to 12:45 p.m., James Dean's 356 Speedster. Where is it? Well, guess what? Noted author and renowned James Dean historian Lee Raskin is going to discuss the discovery of James Dean's long-lost Speedster, the car he owned, you know, that white car with the logo on the side, the prancing horse, and raced before trading it on his Porsche 550 Spyder, which he raced to victory in many races. No, he died in that car. During that fateful last month of September 1955, that would be 550055. VIN number on that car. If you like mysteries, skullduggery, Porsche Speedsters, James Dean, bring your lunch, because here is the car. Was this car lost?
Yeah, there's discussions about that car. Indeed, it was lost, or at least it's been under the radar.
What do we know about this? I mean, that's a pretty amazing Speedster, probably the most valuable Speedster.
You could argue, right?
Right. But therein is the question.
Yeah, there was a discussion.
Is that the car?
Someone approached 000 with a story on that car.
Okay.
And they said, I found the car. It's the car, the family, all this. The car is now red, but it's definitely the car. And I said, tell me more. You know, I'm definitely interested in doing a story for 000, and we would do something rather large on it. It's our kind of story, if it can be verified. And in the end, there was just no legs on that story. It was not the car.
Right. As
far as I could tell, it was not the car.
There are a few people that claim to have this VIN number, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of those stories, right?
Yeah, and this is the problem with Porsche, and I saw it probably in the late 90s, early 2000s coming, back when the cars were starting to get valuable. You knew back then the problem is that they made so many 911Ts. They made so many cars that are close to the cars that are really valuable that it's too tempting for some folks. And when the values get to a certain point, so, you know, it's really it's a tough subject. It's a big deal.
Right. Where do you go for those answers?
A lot of sources. You have to know who to talk to, and there's some technology that can be applied, which is helpful.
Mobile MRIs.
But in the end, it's pretty tough. In the end, I mean, if someone, it just gets down to, there was an RS-27 that went to auction a few years ago that they pulled, I think, the night before or the day of.
The black and orange one?
I don't remember what color it was. I don't think it was the black.
It was a 911T.
Yeah, well, basically.
There was a guy in Hollywood who ended up getting a 911T as an RS.
I think it took them, they had to pull, I probably shouldn't say which body part, but they had to pull a body part off the car. An expert had to pull a body part off the car.
Right.
And by doing that, the night before the auction, I think it was right before the auction, the right expert pulled the right part off the car, and it was not a small thing like just like a gas cap. It was something you didn't want to pull off a car, and it was a fake. And that's some scary stuff. Like that's the kind of stuff where you have to know the right people, you have to have the right documents, you have to do the right research, and that's that's been something I've been looking at for 20 years and something that matters.
What do you suppose Porsche is doing with getting in on the promotion for Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker?
The Taycan.
They're one of 7 major sponsors of the new Star Wars movie. My question: why?
They're obsessed with Star Wars, and they always have.
They are?
Well, look at the Carrera GT exhausts, and they even admitted it back in the day.
Well, look at the back of the new 992 Darth Vader
and
helmet.
Look at the Mission E. If you look at the Mission E concept, the nose is all about Stormtrooper.
Yes. All right. Let's go to some questions. All right. Low End Garage Chicago. How long of a lifespan does he see for 000? We're thankful for what he does. 000 is a premium product, bar none. What is your plan? I think is what he's trying to say. What's your plan? Are you headed into a Hodinkee territory where you become a retailer for Porsches? And where does this go?
I don't know, but the goal when I started the thing with Alex was to do one of the financial advisors in the magazine said, walk before you run, don't do S. And I thought, okay, we're not going to do S. And Alex said, no, we're doing S from the start. And S is the crazy $999 subscription. And I thought, well, if we're going to do that, we better provide people with some value. You don't ask somebody for money without providing value. So he wanted to do a slipcase. Everyone does linen on cardboard, but the problem is the minute you touch it, it's ruined, more or less. So you have to wash your hands before you touch your linen slipcase. So I thought, let's do a metal slipcase. And so we went down this rabbit hole of creating an aluminum slipcase in powder coat. And the idea came along to do each year in a color. And so as we started, we got the company in Petaluma, California is doing them, a small company, and they're beautiful. And they're not cheap to make. And when I started seeing the colors, I thought, okay, I want to do 10 years. The cases were kind of told me where we want to go. So I want to do 10 years of this and then look around and see if I want to do 10 more. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, we'll see. That's a long enough.
Interesting.
That's the long enough timeline. And it was inspired by seeing these cases in the cool colors. So far we've done a very, very dark green like Irish or Brewster. We've done a very strong orange, probably like an RS orange. Doing powder coat gets tricky with nailing a color. And then now we've done mint green for the third year.
There you go.
So,
and the idea being these are not really a magazine. This is something that can stand the test of time,
that
right?
Was the goal.
This is a historical document that masquerades as a magazine.
That was the goal. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't mean to be so serious about this, but I had to move my parents out of their house, and we've all been there. And my mom was a designer of some note, and I had to go through her studio and start taking stuff out of there. And both of you have your work, and both of you know what there's special things. And if you're not there to tell your children what is important or not important, the children are left with this thing of throwing the stuff away. Now think about all the documents and all the things related to Porsche. And I think about all the people who are passing on, and their kids are left with these cars that the three of us know what is really special, or hopefully know what is really special. And the kids come to that shoebox and they say, I don't know what to do with this. Gone.
Yep.
So 000 at some level, part of the mission of it is to preserve these documents, preserve this history, and do it in a way that I couldn't do at Panorama or Excellence. We have 90-page feature stories. You can't do that at a normal car magazine with ads.
Matty DeBoos wants to know, Matty Dubs, if you guys had one Porsche to drive for the rest of your life, what would it be? One for the rest of your life.
CGT.
Carrera GT.
If I don't have to pay for the maintenance, CGT.
Yeah, but that's a lot of daily driving. That's a lot of trips.
That's a bold statement, but I respect it.
I spent 1 week. I did 1,100 miles in 1 week in a Carrera GT.
Wow, that's great.
Really
it is
learned.
one of the greatest underrated Porsches right now.
And I drove it I was living in downtown San Francisco at the time. Now, there were some hills I didn't even bother trying, not because of the clutch. I got used to the clutch width. You could do heel-toe technique. Right. And so you didn't slip it. You could that whole thing where it'll take care of the clutch for you or the gas for you, that doesn't work in San Francisco because of the hills. But you can use heel-toe technique to basically not use the handbrake, and you have no slippage. But the problem with the Carrera GT in San Francisco is no nose lift.
Yes.
That was the killer mistake with that car. Is Porsche should have had nose lift in the CGT.
It's a little early for that.
Well, Ferrari had it. Ferrari had it by then, and some of the aftermarket, like I don't know if it was Teccar or
Leno had his lifted. He was the first guy to lift his Carrera GT. That's what I remember.
No, Porsche had made a lift kit, and Leno grabbed it before Jerry could get it.
Is that really
happened.
right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they had made this single lift kit, and Jerry was all worked up about it.
But that would be the one. If I had to pick one and I didn't have to pay maintenance, that'd be me. What about you two?
Zuckerman? One.
Oh, God, can I tell you I can't choose between two cars?
No. You got to pick one. That's the question.
Okay. Speedster.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which Speedster?
58. I would take a 58 Speedster Super.
Ooh, I like that answer.
That's pretty good.
And I would take my black one with the Rudge wheels, and that covers a lot of Porsche territory. And of course, I live in Southern California. That wouldn't be an answer other places, but where I live and where I drive, that could be the car that I could live with for the rest of my life.
Before we go to Spike's answer, because I want to hear Spike's answer, at the Speedster launch 901, since last time I was with you guys, I went and drove this new Speedster in Sardinia. We'll get there. But they made the mistake, but they had all the previous Speedsters there, and they had an early pushrod car, their silver car from the museum. Mm-hmm. And I drove that thing around Sardinia, in these little coastal towns.
Yeah, wonderful. Your life is
and you know what? I thought I had baseball cap on, and I just wished my wife was sitting next to me. And I was just driving down these little coastal roads around Sardinia, and I thought, whoever is working on an electric sports car for Porsche, if they're going to do one, they should lock them, like chain them into a pushrod Speedster in a coastal town for a month.
Yeah.
And tell them, whatever this thing has, you need to figure out that joy. Because the pushrod Speedster is just joy. I would not want to drive it on the freeway. I would not want to live with it if I had long-distance trips. But around a coastal town, is it beatable?
It's great. It's the greatest on the highway. I mean,
really?
It's like a seat flying down the road. I love it. I mean, that's where it's
a good
just
way
the
of putting
best.
It. Did you say you're a writer? You're a writer?
Here's where it falls apart is when it gets really hot outside.
Yeah.
When it's hot, you suffer.
Yeah.
You'll suffer in it.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know.
Right.
I'd probably pick a 70S just to be different.
What's
that's such
a
a great choice,
1979 11S just is something to drive every day. That delivers a lot of joy. The 73T delivers joy. The 58 Speedsters, they all deliver joy.
But they were all so unique. The 70
Here's
is such
a question
character.
that I actually had. Ollie Barlow, 90, and I was thinking about this too. He's going through the Porsche model numbers. 993, 996, 997, 991. 992, leading back naturally to the 993. What is that?
I think they'll just do 992 point whatever forever. So they'll just do 992.1.
Where are those numbers coming from?
Well, it's clear they ran out of numbers, so they had to go back to where they're
So wait, we went to 997. The 998, is that a Boxster or is that the 987?
So Boxster's 981. It went 986, 987, then 981.
So where are we going after 992?
Well, that's a great question. 993? I mean, is that where we're headed? I think what they should do is they just bring out the air-cooled car again. They should just bring out, just roll that out as, if only as a spoof. They should do the 2024, 2023 911. They should just roll like a completely stock 95.
Right.
With the basket handle was 1 year later, right? Or no, how did basket handle work? The third brake light for US?
Yeah. That was in the early years.
Early ones,
and in the cabriolets.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeff Zwart, our friend and here, wants to know, what is your favorite cover car? And I wonder if it's based on
the pornographer.
This post there.
Funny,
is that his car?
It was his car. That car was his car. He's talking about Sloopy Jr., which of course has an incredible
history. It's on the Instagram post for the question. So
it has an incredible history here in California. And so Jeff is probably laughing now as I mentioned that was indeed his car at one point.
So that's your favorite cover?
No, that's not my favorite cover. Actually, oddly enough, it might be the one that I brought you guys. It took only 20 years to get that story, the LMP 2000. That's on the radar for me as favorite covers.
It's beautiful.
I've done, I don't know how many covers now, probably 100 some odd, 150 covers, 100 to 150 covers.
Does Jeff shoot for you?
He has. And this cover actually reprises one of my other favorites. One of my favorites was his Gamund that we shot for the redesign of Panorama. And oddly enough, if you look at that cover, Richard Barron, the art director on that, wanted to get rid of the California registration sticker on the old vintage plate. And I said, no. I said, you got to keep that. And he said, why? I said, because it's real, and I like reality. I'm tired of these overdone everything. But my fundamental argument was that was the July 2016 issue, and his sticker was July 2016 on his registration sticker was July 2016. I was like, that's another reason you have to keep that sticker.
Granular.
We get superstitious.
So I like those little things, and I mean, obviously at 000 we're into numbers, but the LMP 2000's a big one because this car took 20 years to get this story. It's a huge story in there, and sometimes you go after a story and you don't get it, and you choose not to publish it because you don't have it right. This story took 20 years to get right. Randy Leffingwell handled the text. A lot of people helped with the data, the charts. It has a list of all the part numbers for the car, even though they never built the cars. They only built the one and tested it once. But the funniest part of this deal was I called up Porsche, someone there, and said, hey, we'd like to shoot the LMP 2000 at Weissach. And they said, oh, well, can't you just shoot it here at the museum? I said, no, we'd like to shoot it at Weissach. Well, the car hadn't been to Weissach since Wiedeking killed the program to build the Cayenne. And so we had to really kind of convince them to take it there. Wow. But they eventually did. They brought it back to Weissach to be shot for 000. And so that's a pretty special cover.
It's a beautiful cover.
Go. Well, there it is. Pete Stout, ladies and gentlemen, returning to Spike's Car Radio. You're going to want to subscribe to this magazine, in quotes, which is really a beautiful book that he publishes, 4 times a year?
4 times a year.
And where do we find your site? Is it 000magazine.com?
000magazine.com.
There it is. Thank you, Pete, for coming back. Zuckerman, what do you have to say for yourself?
Thank you for having me again. Pete Stout is always the greatest, and we're going to have to find out why he wanted to cut that conversation short.
We also cut the conversation short on a Speedster, so we have other things to talk about.
I've been offered Speedsters. Speedsters makes me wonder. I've been offered a black one. I've been offered a silver one. Zuckerman's got one coming, but there are a lot of them in play. If anybody wants a Speedster, call me. I'll get you one. They're right now. I have 4 or 5 of them. And I'm your goofball car host, Spike Ferriston.
Goofball.
Wishing you happy Halloween for no reason in particular. And we'll see you next week on Spike's Car Radio.
Thanks for listening to Spike's Car Radio. Download new episodes every Wednesday on the Podcast One app or subscribe now at Apple Podcasts or PodcastOne.com.